that your normal seat?
Yeah.
That's nice.
It is very convenient. And I wanted to see because I left this pen. I leave a pen in here all the time. And somebody steals it, and I wanted to see if this pen was just a junk lodge for the Four Seasons pen. Nobody
Of
wants
course,
that.
nobody wants that.
Yeah.
No.
Leave yourself notes.
Do I leave myself note? No. I do leave a few things in here, but I got. No, I got one. Thanks. No, I actually got in trouble early on because I left like the yellow pages that are the confidential, not knowing that other people would consider it.
I still.
So they.
Well, next time, leave it in
We don't have any authority.
Not very exciting stuff
For
usually.
the signs?
No, it's for the.
Oh, the teller?
Well, you know.
Because the signs are.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Yeah, I know.
If I can have your attention, we'll call the December Rolla Planning and Zoning Commission to order. You should have received the proposed agenda that was posted. Any corrections or changes? If not, we'll proceed with the agenda as distributed. The first item is to approve the minutes. You should have also received a copy of the minutes. I think it came a little late. There was a couple corrections, or one, that's all I saw. So any other corrections? If not, I'll rule those approved as printed and distributed. Next section is report on recent city council actions. Mr. Shields.
thank you. There was an ordinance to approve the final plat of St. Maria's to Tundra, which was a major subdivision plat of 58 lots. And on November 19th, the city council conducted the final reading of this ordinance and approved it. And there was also an ordinance to consolidate lots 2 and 3 and part of 6 of block 5 of Newman's Edition into 2 lots, and that was approved on December 3rd, 2018 by the city council. And that is it for the report on recent city council actions.
Okay. There has been some other council meetings since then, but we'll report on those next month. We have 2 items on the public hearings tonight. The first one is a request to insert a new division in Article 3 of Chapter 42, which is known as the Rolla Planning and Zoning Code, and for this code to be known as Division 22 Wireless Communication Facilities Code. Mr. Shields.
All right, thank you. I'd like to start this one out with, so since we last emailed you all of the staff reports, their AT&T sent their comments on the first draft that we gave you, and special counsel did proposed some revisions that would address some of AT&T's concerns, and I'll actually go through the changes at the end of the presentation. But I just wanted to hand those out real quick so that you have them to read later.
More reading. You need to go to sleep tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, just to start out, I just wanted to show you some pictures so you kind of can get an idea of what we're talking about when we are talking about these things. So small wireless facilities, these are basically small antennas that have a shorter range than a tower. These are the nicer looking ones. This is a disguised support structure, which is any freestanding artificial structure designed for the support of an antenna, and the presence of which is camouflaged or concealed as an appropriately placed and designed architectural or natural feature. As you can see, this one looks like a cactus. They can also look like clock towers. This is a monopole design tower. A tower is a structure designed for the support of one or more antenna. This is the type that this wireless communication facilities code that we're proposing today, which is Division 22 of the Rolla Planning and Zoning Code. This design is the only one that's permitted without a conditional use permit. Well, only one permitted in the code. So, first I wanted to start off talking about small cell small cell technology, in case some of us aren't familiar with it. Cells are part of a communication network that transmit data to mobile devices. There's macro cells and micro cells. Macro cells are basically the towers that you see. They have a wide range, and micro cells have shorter range. So wireless carriers found that macro cells are good for wide area coverage for voice services, but micro cells are better for data coverage because they're closer to the user and there's less signal interference. Towers are normally only permitted in non-residential districts, which makes finding ideal sites for difficult to find. Small cells provide a solution to building more towers in the lack of sites by being able to be deployed around the urban area on existing structures such as utility poles, light poles, traffic lights. In order to facilitate their development, state and federal governments have enacted laws that will prevent localities from making it too difficult, timely, or costly to deploy such technology. At the same time, local governments have been tasked with preventing that same technology from affecting neighborhood character and property values. So there's been some recent state laws that have passed. One was the Uniform Wireless Communication Infrastructure Deployment Act. That was enacted in 2013, but there was revisions done to that more recently. HB 1991 was released this year, and in part specifically targets how localities regulate small cell technology. The Wireless Act's stated purpose is to encourage and streamline the deployment of broadcast and broadband facilities and to ensure the robust wireless radio-based communication services are available throughout Missouri. And they try to accomplish this by streamlining regulations to access right-of-way and city poles, capping costs, and speeds timelines for consideration. So they call them shot clock rules. So you have to approve it by a certain time, or it's automatically approved. So this proposed division of our code is kind of Rolla's zoning solution to this. So in August of this year, we zoned about 58% of the right-of-way R1, and this was in part in response to HB 1991's preemption, the fact that it would preempt certain zoning authority over small cell deployment and certain utility poles, except for areas zoned R1. So, in addition, HB 1991 required that shortly after its enactment that all cities adopt an ordinance explaining the provider's rates, fees, and other terms that comply with the new law. And so, Division 22, this proposal, is in response to that mandate. So, the public purposes of such regulations is to preserve the character, aesthetics, and property values of the city. And does this by regulating the height, appearance, and et cetera of these facilities. So I'm not going to go through the definitions, but they're here in case we need to come back to them. One I did want to point out is fast track small wireless facility. So if it meets certain volumetric criteria, it can be considered a fast track small wireless facility, which is more speedier. It's more speedy than other options. So this kind of breaks down the different types of the different ways that it can be reviewed. So, and by the way, this ordinance was written by a group of lawyers that we hired to do this. So, if you meet the general requirements, which we'll go over next, you can either be reviewed as a permitted use or an administrative approval. And these are the types of actions that can be reviewed under permitted use and administrative approval. If it does not meet general requirements or does meet general requirements but does not fall under the permitted use or administrative approval, it would go through the conditional use permit process. Towers permitted in non-residential zones only would be done through the CUP process. So, just real quick, some of the general requirements: security, lighting, one spot per support structure. Support structures are towers and disguise support structures. And then these are the design requirements, such as the color must be consistent with the environment, height requirements, the monopole design I discussed, And towers must be surrounded by walls and landscape. Co-locations on historical structures require a public hearing. We don't have to go into this, but some of the fast track specs some of the criteria that you have to meet to be considered a fast track is such as you have to be no more than 27 square feet of exterior surface area, not exceeding 6 feet above the top of an existing structure or utility pole. And lastly, the revisions addressing AT&T's comments, the packet I just gave you. There was some added reasons for the denial of small cell facilities, language inserted for consolidated applications, spelled out application fees for different types of small wireless facilities, added additional language concerning appearance of ground equipment and antenna design, added requirement that any additional information requested by the director be found in a public available document, added desired definitions of person and right-of-way, and added AT&T definitions to utility pole definition. Modified description of the sky support structure, added in federal exemptions throughout the code, and removed the requirement that to the extent permitted by applicable law, all information required by the code and application must be submitted for the applications to be complete. So that's a summary of what was changed. There have been no protest petitions or official comments, except for the comments, obviously, AT&T submitted. But no official comments have came to the Community Development Department. And a memo from the Rolla Municipal Utilities was submitted, and it's in figure 5 in your packet. The action required from the Planning and Zoning Commission is to recommend the denial, approval, or conditional approval of the City of Rolla's proposal to insert Division 22 into the Rolla Planning and Zoning Code. And that's it. Anybody have any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Shields?
James, give me an example of who's going to be using this, the small cell, whatever.
Communication companies, so AT&T.
So, like my computer, my phone.
Oh, you mean the
Like
public?
Fidelity or
Oh,
something
everybody.
like that?
Fidelity. I'm not sure. I that would be a question that perhaps Chad Davis may be able to answer. I don't know if he can take questions, but everybody that uses a mobile device will be using these and benefiting from them, I would imagine, because they transmit data. You get better if you have more of these. You have the better data you have, and the faster your technology works. I believe I would ask Chad though. I just did a little research into. I had never heard of a small wireless facility, but it's better for data transfer so that your phone goes fast. That's about as simple as I can say.
So if I, as an individual, wanted really fast service, and I wanted to put one of these antennas in my backyard so I really got good service, what would happen? Could I do that?
Yeah, it's permitted in it's permitted in all zones. Certain proposals are permitted in all zones, and yes, you could hook it onto a single-family house.
It said, one of the things it said is that the height would be no more than reasonable. That's pretty vague, but it did list a maximum height.
120 feet for tower.
Who determines what's reasonable?
Well, no, it can't be higher than the underlying zoning district. So let's say you wanted to put a tower in the M2 district. Well, the height maximum. Oh wait, there is no maximum height in the M2 district. Let's say you wanted to put it in C3. Well, the height the height limit maximum height is 64 feet. So it couldn't be more than 64 feet unless you can show that it needs to be 64 feet, more than 64 feet.
Because it had a maximum of 100 and some feet.
But at no time can it be more than 120 feet.
Any other questions?
This is a better slide to look at.
Clear as mud, I'm sure. Okay, if not, we'll officially open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Chad Davis, Operations Manager for Rolla Municipal Utilities. 811 Highway O Street here in Rolla is our service center's address. So,
Thank you.
just a couple of comments to go along with the comment letter that we provided through the DRC process a few weeks ago. Working through and proposed changes that were provided by AT&T earlier this week, we did have a chance to review those. We received those from the city, I think it was yesterday. So we've had a chance to look at them a little bit, but not fully digest them. But I would suggest, just want to comment on at least one topic area that James mentioned, is the additional definition of right-of-way that AT&T has proposed. From a utility perspective, that could be very concerning, and maybe some of those concerns will be alleviated through the process and exactly how it would flow through all the process. But the potential to add into the right-of-way definition, adding easements obtained by utilities or private easements under a right-of-way umbrella is concerning for the potential that some of those easements may be restricted to only certain uses by that private utility. And whether that's RMU's electric and water service, or Ameren, or somebody, or the intercounty, or anybody else that has those easements, those easements may only restrict for certain usage. So to bring other uses into those easements may be a concern. The additional concern that we've identified quickly was adding in poles, pipes, cables, conduits, wires, optical cables for electrical current, and I'm abbreviating some of that proposed paragraph, or paraphrasing it, but simply adding electrical current or impulses utilized by the municipally owned electric utility. Bringing that under a right-of-way definition, potentially, in a quick review, I haven't fully vetted it all out, but could be contradictory to some of the other terms. Generally, small wireless facilities under this concept, poles owned and operated by RMU for electric distribution purposes, are exempt from this concept in general. So my concern is that putting this back in as a definition of right-of-way, does it bring back in those electrical distribution poles now as a place where these could be put back in, where these facilities could be installed under the terms of this ordinance and these codes. There is still a possibility that even if the utility electric distribution facilities are exempt from small wireless facility under the code perspective, it doesn't prohibit the installation of those facilities on RMU poles. That would be done through a third-party agreement, pole attachment agreement, that would be negotiated by the providers and RMU in our case, or any other electric distribution facilities. It's a separate agreement outside of the small cell wireless code being proposed. So, but the way that right-of-way is defined, I'm not sure how that would be changed. So we haven't had a chance to fully review that yet.
So when are you going to review that? After this is made law?
We just got these yesterday to have a chance to even see them. So we're trying to figure it out quickly. And I haven't seen the new draft yet. I've seen AT&T's comments. I haven't seen the complete new draft yet. So, and it may not be a problem. I just haven't had a chance to fully digest where all it changes, the implementation of it. And for the utility perspective, it's very concerning putting these facilities on electric distribution poles. There has been some effort to do that over the years. Some of the providers, and I won't speak for AT&T or anybody else or any of the other providers, they've improved how they're putting those on electric distribution poles, but there's some horror stories of trying to put those on electric distribution poles, and sometimes the way they install them is actually putting the antenna up above the electric lines. So needless to say, we've got to be very concerned about how that would be done. And we have worked out an agreement with one provider for installing facilities like this on a separate pole just for that purpose, as opposed to putting it on other electric distribution poles. So we have an agreement in place with one provider that was interested in doing that third-party agreement. They haven't actually given us the go-ahead to actually install that pole yet, but we do have an agreement in place, so I think it does speak to that we can and we will try to work with providers to make those third-party agreements where it makes sense.
So how many, so there could be a lot of different providers in the community doing this by themselves?
Yes. Yeah.
Not in conjunction with other people?
Well, I think, as speaking for the industry, from what we understand, they could be doing it as together, or they could be doing it individually. And I'm just summarizing or kind of projecting here. I mean, you've got AT&Ts, Verizons, Sprints, T-Mobiles, all the different cell phone providers. Plus, I know the one that we worked with was a company called Mobility, which they're actually doing some of the site preparation and putting things in place so that others can use those systems. It's a very fast growing, and there's a need for the deployment. There's no doubt. I mean, we're not trying to prevent it. We want to encourage that the deployment takes place. It is taking place in a practical manner, and whether or not the state statutes specifically exempted out the state statutes generally exempted out the electric distribution facilities. Adding in that definition of right-of-way concerns me that it could bring those back in.
You kind of have that worked out before it gets to council?
We will try and we will work quickly to do that. Yes.
We basically have four options. We can approve,
Yes.
approve the conditions, we can deny, or we can set it aside. Setting aside maybe until they get things worked out. Is it that big a problem, or?
I
All we
know
do
there's
is
a need.
recommend.
Yeah, and I know there's a need, and I'm sure James can speak to this too. I know there's a need to continue to move this forward quickly based upon some statutes that were passed with the state legislation. So I don't want to be in front of you looking like I'm asking to hold it up, because I know there's other reasons that it needs to take place, and we can continue to try to negotiate those concerns and make them practical.
It's kind of like raking leaves in the wind. It's just constantly changing. I'm not sure we can stay up with it, or you can either, but, okay. Any other questions for the gentleman?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll officially close the public hearing.
Yeah. I was told that if you need, we can set it aside. I think that it says within 2 months of it being, basically by the end of February, but I don't know the specifics. All I know is, because it starts at the beginning of the year, and I believe it says you have to have the ordinance within 2 months, from what I read. But I was told that if you really need, that you could set it aside for 1 month. But that's
City's attorneys and their contracted attorneys have reviewed this, and
yes, they're the ones. Yes, they're the ones that provided the revisions.
So we just recommended with a condition that they work it out with RMU on their concerns.
you can make any condition you want, so.
It just seems like you might put your own utility company in
Right.
a problem area by pushing it real fast.
They're pretty fast with their responses. Once they get looking at this, I'm sure.
James, it seems like a lot of deference was given to AT&T in this case in terms of how what they got to define and everything else. Why was so much deference given to them, and why did we make changes based on what they wanted versus what our utility company needs?
I wasn't given reasons. Basically, we did those revisions so that revisions could be considered by City Council. They don't have to accept the revisions, or they could accept the revisions. They're just proposed revisions. They're not. It's kind of like saying, if you do want to give some concessions, I guess it's called, to AT&T, this is what the lawyers would want you to limit it to.
So our lawyers have looked at this and have limited what AT&T has requested. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, this is what they were willing to concede. I can't say that. What I would say is that if that would be the most, I would think that we would want to concede.
Who are our lawyers on this?
Vogel, well, Aaron Steele is Aaron Steele is the lead, has been the lead on this case. But it's Vogel and Associates. I'll have to get the exact name of them.
I mean, it'd be nice to hear from them why they wouldn't give up or concede anything.
Right.
I mean, if there's a good reason, I understand, but it just seems like AT&T says, we want this, and as far as I can tell from what I received, it's like, okay, you can have it.
Well, it's basically the version that you got. That is what she recommends. But these proposed revisions are basically saying whether if you are going to give them some respond or approve some of their recommendations, this is as far as I would go. And they did say they would be able to come in next month, or they can come into town. They just we just didn't have them here this time. But they said they can come in and speak.
AT&T or the
lawyers. Sorry,
lawyers.
So if you know, perhaps the first city council meeting they can speak to the matter.
Well, I personally feel that I think, I would like RMU to have time to review this and give it the time it needs. And this seems to be important to them. And so if it's important to them, I think we should pass on this until they can give us their guidance.
If it comes down to
Except
it,
we
could
only
always
meet,
do first and
we
final.
only meet once a month, so.
But perhaps we could do first and final next month if we need to be.
Well, we don't do first.
No, yeah, I know. I mean, at the city council, if it
You
needs
just
to be.
make, I don't think anybody objects to putting regulations in that controls the new technology. I just think it's a matter of
Working out and
And James, is the 2-month period in regards to the enactment of the new state laws? Is that why we're in this time frame of 2 months?
Yes. Yeah. That is correct. I would just probably rather read from my report because I do talk about specifically. But yeah, 2 months after it's enacted, you have to have an ordinance or an agreement in place. But I really shouldn't speak to the specific date. That's just what I read from the bill, August 28th.
So the revisions, the additions and the deletions in the present policy that you gave us are in regards, the lawyers are making those in regards to being in compliance with the new state law.
The Division 22, is trying. It's satisfying that requirement that you have to have in place an ordinance within 2 months, I believe, after the enactment or after the bill becomes active.
So in regards to, we're trying to make sure that RMU is not going to be left out in the cold in regards to the new law enactment, in regards to what AT&T wants to come in and do, what Fidelity wants to do, whoever wants to do. I'm getting this feeling that whatever they want to do, they're going to come in and do it, but we need to have an ordinance in place that says there is limitations to what they can and cannot do, correct?
That's correct, and that's what Division 22 is. And if we wanted to make those proposed revisions after it was passed, we could always come back the next month. But yeah, that's exactly what this is doing, putting limitations on it. But there's also a right-of-way ordinance that I'm not that involved with, but that will also address these new laws, the potential issues that can come from the preemptions of the state law.
So Brown, do you need a motion to set this aside for a minute?
Need motion to either approve, disapprove, approve the conditions, or set aside. That's about the only 4 options.
I move to set it aside.
Second.
We have a motion to set it aside.
Can we
1
put-
month?
Can we put one addition to that, make sure the lawyers are here for the next meeting?
Yeah.
Or at least have given input.
So at least we can get their input and.
I mean, they can send written input, I would think.
Right.
You can't demand someone be here. I don't
Well,
think.
Yeah, I think an advisory opinion from them would be nice, just to outline why they made these changes or why they made these concessions to AT&T and why we should follow them or not.
The month's recess won't cause any additional problems?
No, I was told that they can set it, you can set it
Okay.
aside.
Just want to make sure that's clear.
Because that still gives them February, and they can do a first and final reading
Yeah.
at the February meeting, correct?
That's correct.
So,
And there's some more like details about the whole deadline thing that only the lawyers know about. I just read that from the bill, so 2 months after it's enacted.
Okay, we have a motion. Set this aside. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Next item is another public hearing, a request for the city of Rolla to annex 1.68 acre parcel identified with the Phelps County Assessor's Account number 3356.03 and to simultaneously designate the zoning of said parcel as heavy manufacturing district M2 RCDC, which is Rolla Community Development Corporation. Mr. Shields.
Thank you. This is, the subject property is right here, delineated in the red. It is located in Phelps County, approximately 150 feet northwest of the intersection of Old Highway 66 and High Point Industrial Park Drive. Just for reference, this is Love's truck stop here. So it is the Raleigh Community Development Department, RCDC. Just to tell you a little bit about them, their mission is to sustainably attract, invest in, support, assist in, and positively impact regional growth. And how they do this is through ownership and development of industrial sites, investment and maintenance of an incubator building, and financial investment in select projects. As you can see, the parcel number is 3356.03. You have, it's M2 all around here, but C3 over here. They would like to have similar zoning to surrounding RCDC-owned parcels, and the M2 zoning would permit the site to be consolidated into a developable industrial site. Now, in the report, it did say there was no explicit purpose for the annexation, but they did say that it will clean up an overlooked parcel and bring it under city jurisdiction consistent with other RCDC properties adjoining the subject parcel. And one other thing about the report is at that time we were going to annex this right-of-way, but we decided that we were not going to go forward with that. There was no reason to do it. So, this is the urban growth map, urban growth area map. This is in the comprehensive plan, so it hasn't been updated since 2005, and it should be updated from time to time. And it reflects the additional space that may be needed to accommodate population growth and future development trends. And in addition, it represents the area in which urban scale growth will be encouraged based on physical characteristics, service capability, and growth visions for Rolla. Rolla 2020 projected that Rolla 2020 is our comprehensive plan. It projected that at least 1,000 acres would need to be annexed by 2015 to minimize land value inflation. Whether that's still true or not would need to be analyzed. This is a map of all the vacant industrial land that we have in Rolla. As you can see, this is not the land use layer in the GIS system is not totally 100% accurate. So these two parcels with X's on them have it, but it's estimated from the GIS data that there's about a little over 400 acres of vacant industrial zone land. This map is the land that we've annexed since 2005. So as you get, and that totals to 328 acres. 110 of that is currently zoned M2. So about 38% of the annexed land is M2. So there are two state criteria for annexation based on state law, and one is the annexation is reasonable and necessary to the proper development of the city, and the other is, does the city have the ability to furnish normal municipal use services to the area to be annexed within a reasonable time? So one of the guiding principles of Rolla 2020 is to provide adequate and appropriate located areas for industrial development. So the way that there's an annexation checklist in the comprehensive plan. So this was I did a little analysis in the report to try to determine if this, to help you determine if this was necessary to the proper development of the city. So one of the things was this principle. Also, the subject parcel is within the UGA, which means that it's located in a proper place. And one of the community issues in Rolla 2020 is that there was a limited amount of land suitable for industrial use inside the corporate limits. So whether that's true or not still, based on land use demand, is something that would need to be further analyzed, and we just don't have the time or resources to do that type of analysis. Gaps in city land can cause sprawl. So when you have gaps in your city, then you have to spread, the infrastructure gets spread out. Services have to drive farther to get to places, so you shouldn't have holes in your city that spread out your city and make it inefficient to have to provide infrastructure and services. RMU and so that's in regards to the first criteria. The second criteria appears to have been met. No objections have been made by any of the by RMU or any other Rolla departments that provide services. So real quick, much of the land to the west and the north of the subject parcel was annexed in 1994. To the northwest was annexed in 2000. Nearby to the northwest was annexed in 2010. Anything that's within the urban growth area but it is not in the city is given a future land use map designation, and so that's why the future land use map designation here is community commercial. Right here, so there is no zoning, obviously, but there's C3 is across the street, and this was zoned right at the time when Love's was actually had bought that land. So this is actually a prime. Well, it appears to be a prime location for commercial establishments you would see off the side of off the highway, which is fast food establishments, gas stations. And this parcel was not owned by RCDC at the time. They bought that in 2012. So one of the assumptions you could possibly make is that perhaps if RCDC did own this at the time it was given this flume designation, they may have and because RCDC is in the business of developing industrial sites, it may not have been given this community commercial flume designation. It might have been given industrial designation. That's just so when zoning annex land, there's the comprehensive plan and the zoning code both talk about it. So when you annex land, should be zoned according to the current use of the land. But if the land is vacant and the applicant of the annexation has not proposed the land use, the property shall be zoned as the most restrictive classification, which is rural residential. If the applicant proposes a zoning classification based on a proposed land use, the city council shall consider the annexation and proposed zoning. And if that zoning proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan and satisfies the rezoning review criteria, it should be approved. So this is where we do a little bit of because this is also a zoning analysis, because you have to make a decision on whether the zoning is correct, not just if it should be annexed. That's why the staff report is a little long. So one of the criteria is it consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan? So the flume land use, so we went over this part of this section here. But the zoning the subject parcel M2 would be consistent with addressing one of the guiding principles of Rolla 2020, which is to provide adequate and appropriately located areas for industrial development, and address one of the community issues, which is there's a limited amount of suitable land in Rolla. As far as land use compatibility goes, adjacently west of the subject parcel is an electromagnetic compatibility lab and warehousing and distribution facilities, which are all zoned M2. All the parcels abutting and this parcel are owned by RCDC, and together they would actually make a large industrial site. And everything, so all their property is vacant, and all their immediately abutting property is vacant and zoned M2 also. As far as so to the north of the subject parcel is a manufacturing plant, and to the east is a gas station. So all of these uses produce traffic, and there are no residential uses in the immediate vicinity. Industrial warehousing and intense commercial uses are compatible because they are both auto-oriented and produce truck traffic. And that's it on that one. I already talked about the last point. Impact, all of the potential land uses in the area produce similar types and amounts of traffic. Increasing industrial activity to the area should not have a negative impact on non-vehicular traffic relative to the current state of the pedestrian environment. Basically, it's not a very pedestrian-friendly place anyways right now, but so it's not going to affect it. There's really no housing around there anyway. So it's not like a walkable neighborhood. Anyways, the subject parcel only abuts with other parcels zoned M2, and while the area is located across the street from other commercial property and would be an appropriate location for commercial activity normally associated with interstate off-ramps, the area has been substantially developed as industrial since it was given the community commercial flume designation. So there are some changing conditions. And that is it. No official comments from the public have been submitted. The fire chief acknowledged that the fire department could provide service to this parcel, which speaks to the second state criteria. Rolla Municipal Utilities requested from the applicant an easement, but it was decided at the Development Review Committee meeting that this request would be more appropriately requested during the platting process when they consolidate the lots. And the action requested from the Planning and Zoning Commission is to recommend to the City Council the approval, denial, or conditional approval of this proposal to annex the subject property and zone it M2. And that's it, if you had any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Shields? I had one. How did they get the name Parrot Boulevard for M2 commercial?
Perot Boulevard, yeah. I think it's Perot, P-E.
Perot, I thought,
Yeah,
okay.
Perot.
That's actually on the second item tonight, but Roe is the maiden name of the wife of Sherwood Cunningham we bought that property from.
Okay, makes sense. I knew there had to be some good explanation.
Yeah.
Kind of unique to have a boulevard in a M2 area. But, any other questions? Okay, if not, I'll officially open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Mr. Williams?
Matt Williams with Rolla Community Development Corporation. I don't have anything to speak of. I just wanted to see if you all had any questions about the annexation.
Any questions for Mr. Williams?
We don't have any immediate plans for it. We occasionally get people interested in the property and thought we probably ought to get it annexed in and get it some regulations on it so we don't end up with Uranus East sitting on our city limits doorstep. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'll officially close the public hearing. Any other questions for Mr. Shields? We've been asked to recommend the annexation. I'd entertain a motion then.
So moved.
Motion by Monty Shields. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Smith? Any other questions or discussions? Roll call vote, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Crowell,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Schmidt,
Yes.
Monty Shields,
Yes.
Stephen Shields.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We have no old business. We have one item of new business, which is similar to what we just talked about. It's a request to subdivide lot 4, 5, and 6 of the final plat of High Point West number 1 into 4 new lots.
Thank you. The subject parcels are located to the west and south of the west end of Perot Boulevard in the northern section of Rolla, Missouri, as you can see here. The applicant is the RCDC again. They owns the property, and Tim Johnson, on behalf of Ameren Transmission Company, has been acting as the agent. So right now, Ameren is planning on buying a piece of land and building a electric power station on part of this land. Part of their negotiation is subject to the approval of this final plat, which is a subdivision of Lot 5 and Lot 6 of the previous High Point subdivision into 4 new lots. And as you can see on this next slide, Ameren is planning on buying this tract right here and putting a substation on it, Lot 1. Non-residential lots are permitted. So as far as the subdivision regulation conformance goes in regards to lots, every lot has to have frontage on a public street, except for non-residential land. And if it is non-residential land, you can have an easement instead, but that easement must be paved of a sufficient width to get services through it. And so how we did this was, what we came to is that this is all an easement right here. So both Lot 3 and Lot 2, which do not have frontage, have frontage on an access and ingress and egress easement. We also they also provided a note on the plat that says that the pavement on these lots, the part of this easement will conform to the regulations that speak to paved roadways. And there's also a note on the plat that restricts the use to only non-residential uses. So that's how we ensure that. That's how we made sure that they conform to Section 4226.6. One other thing is that this is a flag lot. This is a flag lot, and it meets all the requirements for a flag lot. But this will not be able to be subdivided further, which shouldn't be an issue because they are building a power station on there until a road is built into here. That's just something I'd like to note. There's also another easement provided in the southwest corner, and that was at the request of RMU. It's located on Lot 3, immediately south of the south property line it's right here. Okay, and there have been no protest petitions. Other than that, it meets all the subdivision regulations. No protest petitions or public comments have been filed to this department, and the action required from the Planning and Zoning Commission is to recommend to the City Council the approval, denial, or conditional approval of the final plat of High Point West number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Any questions, comments from commissioners?
James, on Lot 3 now, once this goes in, the only way to get to this far west side of Lot 3 is to go around it. Is that correct? You can't go through it. You can't go through Lot 1.
This is, there's a utility easement.
Utility easement, yeah.
Yeah, but RMU made sure that they have access to this corner over here through easements.
Well, it touches Lot 3 over on the east side, but it basically makes the back side useless.
Yeah, okay, see. So they can go from this easement to this easement to this easement to that easement down here, I believe. RMU would be able to talk about access more. I know, I believe. But basically, it's, as far as subdivision regulations go, they have, as long as they have access at some point, it doesn't matter if you can access the rest of the lot as far as easements go. The only reason we gave RMU easements was, or they gave RMU easements was because RMU asked for them, but that has nothing to do with the subdivision regulations.
there's access, but, I mean, this is useless.
Oh, it's here.
And this is being
So,
vacated.
James, are they going to complete the boulevard so that it comes up to Lot 2?
No,
No.
no public improvements are gonna be made as far as roads
Okay.
go.
For some reason, I thought you said something about.
Lot 1 has 100 feet of frontage, which is the minimum for
Right.
RM2 lots. And then there's gonna be a road basically that touches Lot 3 and Lot 2. So the road will have to touch the boundary of Lot 2 and Lot 3 because they don't have frontage. It's basically a driveway, it's not a road.
Okay.
It's a private shared
Private,
driveway.
okay. But somehow they're going to have to make sure that there is an access point at Lot 2
Yes.
and Lot 1. Okay.
They have to have a they have to pave up to that point and it has to
Okay.
be sufficient width.
That's it.
Yeah. And this is in the process of being vacated also. There's been a proposal to vacate this section of this because it's not needed anymore. Just throwing that out there.
And those are the public easements, I mean, the utility easements are.
This one is, it's just a 60-foot easement. It was for utilities. It was gained for utilities back in 2010, and RMU doesn't need it anymore. That's just to note.
Any other questions? Comments? I'd entertain a motion to address this subdivision. Yes, Mr. Williams,
You want me to address any of those questions?
please come forward. We always like input.
I think as Russ brought up, that the back end of Lot 3 is kind of useless. It's already useless. It's a slant about like that. So this Lot 1 that's being carved out of that back part of High Point West is basically the only usable ground back there. So we're not overly concerned about being able to get back there for any reason. As far as access to Lot 2, there's already an access road coming in from the north, an easement road up there. This will just give Lot 2 a second access road that actually touches a public street. There's one that runs down underneath the power lines to the north. That's how we've been getting in and out of Lot 2 for decades. There's a cell tower on that side is what's located at Lot 2. Anything else? Oh, this easement across this diagonally. When RMU installed the new high voltage transmission lines that come into the Alderman substation, that diagonal easement is where the old transmission lines ran, and those have been abandoned. They don't exist anymore.
Would it make sense to combine that thing with Lot 2?
Not Lot 2. You mean this back here?
Yeah.
The west side.
Or
The
Lot
steep
3.
ground, steep ground.
Well, it's all combined. It wraps around in an L shape all the way out there. It's all, that Lot 3 is it's a big kind of an L-shaped lot.
So this is part of that. Okay.
Yeah, that easement just
Then
crosses,
that's not a
but it's all
problem.
one lot.
So they can get access to
It's for safe if you're interested.
it. I think we're good. Any other questions? It's always debatable. And entertain a motion?
Move we send this request to City Council with our recommendation for approval.
Mr. Monty Shields?
Second.
Mr. C. Shields seconded. Any other questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Jordan? Oh, he's not here, I'm sorry. Martin?
Yes.
Schmidt?
Yes.
Monty Shields?
Yes.
Steven Shields?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Bowie?
Yes.
And Crowell.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Next section's report from the chairperson, committee, or staff. The only thing I'd add is you might mail Mr. Jordan a copy of the revisions, since he's not here.
Yeah.
And I didn't get a copy either, but.
You didn't? I thought I gave you one at the very beginning.
He's got one
Let's
now.
go on now. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
The only other announcement is the city council set aside the sign ordinance. You guys thought I was crazy when I said I couldn't imagine anything being as simple as signs being so complex. But anyway, they set it aside for more input from somebody, community, I guess. So if you're interested, you might want to attend that public hearing or whatever they're having. Information, I think.
Yeah.
Any other comments or anything from the commissioners?
We had it yesterday.
Oh, you had it
Anything from staff? Anything else to report?
No, it doesn't look like we'll have anything next month. As far as we have as far as it looks right now, we probably will not have a meeting next month. Oh, well, yeah, we do, because of the wireless. So, never mind. Nothing else to report.
Any other?
Yeah.
I don't know. I tried to talk you out of it, so. You guys won't listen. Nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Guess we're on the same spot.
What's that? Yeah.